So, hello and welcome to Entrepreneurs a Friend. I'm Paul Greystoke. I am a content writer and a Google geek, and I am joined today by Ian Warrender, who is running Warrender Technical Solutions. And I've known Ian for quite a while. And he's he's a genius when it comes to automating things and putting AI in businesses, and he's made a tremendous business difference to businesses throughout the UK. And I want to chat to him today about his thoughts on AI and automation and all that kind of stuff. So, hi Ian, how are you doing?
Hi Paul, you're far too generous. Yes, I'm Ian from Warrender Technical Solutions. I attempt to bring some order to chaos. Yes, so how are you, Paul, today?
I am very, very well. Despite the weird storm that seems to have knocked down sort of people's, there's been trees uprooted and everything, isn't there? Sort of over here.
Walls, trees. We have a small hole in our roof, which I suppose I should count ourselves lucky that that's the only thing we have.
So can we start off by, I've given you a bit of an intro, but can you tell me a bit about what it is you do for clients, and we'll go from there?
Absolutely. So I'm a process engineer as my background, and basically I run a business consultancy where I go into businesses and I assess what they're doing, and I try and give them some time back. And I do that through multiple ways. One is just looking at their processes. So looking at the steps they take to go from the start of whether there is whether it's a product or service to what they deliver at the end. And we try and look at what the steps is in between. The next sort of stage, and what we're coming on to with yourself, is looking at systems. So what can we do to minimize the amount of time somebody's manually doing elements that in their business that can be automated? What is it that they're doing that they don't need to do? And it all comes down to something that may take somebody 4 hours fighting with the system to do, and probably give them a button to do in a few seconds. And it's that element of what are they an expert in? If they're for example, if they're a caterer, they don't want to be spending 4 hours trying to sort out an Excel spreadsheet to put some numbers in. They want to be doing some baking. Or if there are landscapers and they've got people doing a job somewhere, they don't want to be spending 3 hours trying to organize the calendar for people to be at a particular job. They just want to be able to assist them to tell them where the person needs to be, when they need to be there, and things move on. And so a lot of that's to do with the system, and then beyond systems, I look at the organization structure. So how is a business organized? Because generally, especially for small businesses, there's a tendency for information need to come from the top down without the understanding that information needs to go from the bottom up to understand what the problems are within the business. If you don't understand what the problems are, you can keep giving people instructions and they won't be able to achieve what they are. So that's really from a top level where I'm coming from.
Okay. Now, a lot of the sort of when we talk to clients, there's a lot of fear around the use of AI and the use of automation, and and the things that, I don't know if you found it as well, but we find things like people just don't think they're qualified enough to do this, or they, on the other hand of things, they think, well, I'm going to lose my job because AI is going to come and nick it. So what's your kind of response to that?
It's not about people. It's definitely not about AI taking people's jobs. What it is about is allowing people to be experts in what they're in, which is what are people. A person's job isn't to mess with a computer system. That's not a person's job. There's not, with the exception of people like myself who mess with systems, majority of people out there that isn't their job. Their job is to do something that's productive. And removing the systems from that allows them to be more productive, produce more service or product or whatever that is, and allow them to basically be more profitable, use less energy. So we're talking about, the net neutrality. if you could stop using your computer for 12 hours and reduce that to 2 hours and do something else, you're using less energy. And so unless we can start getting Android robots that can start doing all the expert things that people are doing, which we are so far away from, what we're really talking about with AI is reducing the frustration that people have with systems, reducing the amount of time that they're messing with the thing that they don't need to do, that they're not experts in. And so that's
okay.
really where we're coming from.
So, I mean, I've always said, and it's something that I firmly believe in, that people naturally have two things. They have time and they have money to greater or lesser degrees. And the better you use one, the more you can sort of improve the other one. Now, everybody has 24 hours in a day. And so what you're saying really is, as an entrepreneur, or a serial entrepreneur, which is a lot of the people that we meet are serial entrepreneurs who are starting one business, another one, and they have massive staff and they have sort of their life is built up around that. And it's about freeing up some of that time so they can get on to doing what they actually love doing. Exactly. Rather than having to sort of concentrate on the AI aspect or the drudgery of doing certain tasks. So on that subject, then, what kind of tasks would you say that AI now can make easier? What can AI do for it? If I was a new entrepreneur coming into this and I was running a business,
So there's three areas where I encourage small businesses to look at with AI. One is planning and booking. And so when you've got a business, there's a lot of tasks to do. And especially if you start getting staff, there's a lot of organization in terms of what the staff is doing. And with AI, you do a lot of the planning and booking. The AI can tell you who's best to do what job and when's best to do it. The second element is processes. With any sort of system out there, with any sort of product or service out there, there are various things that you go through as a business. And some of it's either an instruction, or it's a checklist, or it is a decision. Now, everything outside the decision can be processed, and so you could get AI to tell you, to give you that checklist when you need it. So it's not just a thing on the desk. It's like, which checklist am I going through now? The checklist comes up at the right part of the process, and you go through it. Make sure you do things. Checklists aren't to say that you're stupid and you're going to forget something. Checklists are prime elements that businesses should be doing. For example, pilots do them before the takeoff. That isn't to say the pilot does not fly the plane, but the pilot goes to the checklist to make sure that that plane is ready to take off, ready for that flight, ready to make sure it can get there. And that's similar in business. You need to make sure that what you're starting off at this particular part of the process is ready for that, to launch that, and that everything you need to do that is ready. You'll find it yourself, but you don't want to get halfway through a process and find some critical piece of information isn't available, going back to clients and going, what's this one thing? And then they answer that one thing and it changes something else that you didn't realize. And all of a sudden you spent 4 hours going down a rabbit hole because you made an assumption because you didn't ask the right question. And that's all the checklist is there for, to make sure you've asked the right questions, you've got the right information. And the third thing that AI is really good for is just the simple aspect of recording what you've done. And so, again, in terms of, and this is more important when you've got staff, in terms of identifying who's done what and when they did it and why they did it, AI is really good at that, rather than, the people like myself who had clock-in sheets and things like that. There's a lot of paper there that somebody else manually has to go through, manually has to interpret, manually has to collate. AI can do that for you. And so it's those elements of booking the initial, following those processes through the business, and then recording what was done, which is the three main elements for small businesses, which we can automate and take out of people's mind space, because you're saying that there's only a limited amount of time and a limited amount of money, but there's a limited amount of memory. What do we actually need to physically remember? And if we can take those elements that we just mentioned out of people's what do I need to remember, it means they've got more brain capacity for the actual important stuff that's going to make the business move forward.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, that as a business owner, because I own a few businesses myself, and I must admit that I would rather spend my time looking at the overall vision and saying, right, this is where I want the business to go. And I can't count the amount of times in the past I've been sitting down at a program I've never used before, or trying to get in grips with some sort of CRM system, going, what? I don't know. You know what I mean? And you think, I've wasted half a day here.
Yeah.
Sometimes more, trying to do one task. And people sort of organize the days in different ways, but I sort of start mine off with a bit of a checklist of the 7 most important things I need to do in that day. Yeah. And then, I do those things. But it always, the best laid plans of mice and men, it doesn't always work out that way, does it? And I've got to say, the main reason it doesn't work out that way for me still is because sometimes I'm trying to do something which is either so painfully boring and complicated. You see, there's some things I don't want to get. I want to get the grips of it because it's going to forward my business, but the actual program or the actual task is so monotonous.
Yes. Yes.
Can you talk us through how AI can sort of break the monotony or get rid of the monotony and help people sort of free up that day or that half day?
Absolutely, yeah. It's really about trying to identify when you pass that line. That's a difficult thing for small businesses, because you can invest so much time on trying to get a CRM sorted or on trying to get some sort of thing booked or something like that, that if you just took a step back before you started it and said, is there an organization out there that can do that for me? Or is there something else that's maybe better suited for the business I'm looking at than this particular one? Because where we've ended up with modern technology is there's so many applications out there that's been designed for so many different variations of things. And then what we end up finding is that somebody tells us that this particular CRM is brilliant. What they haven't told you is that it's brilliant for them because of the variations of their business matches that particular CRM. And you go into it and then you end up trying to coax it into a particular shape that it was never designed to do in the first place, because your particular business doesn't fit the exact variation that was designed for in the first place. But you've been told it's excellent. So you're telling yourself, it must be me. It can't be the system, because somebody else out there has told me this is excellent. It's working for them. And it's taking that step back and going, hang on a minute, maybe I should have a conversation, speak to somebody that can see it independently and say, am I really going down the right route, or am I just been wasting the past 3 hours?
I suppose in a way it's like, if you would take technology out of the equation, one of the key pieces of advice I was given as an entrepreneur was delegate. And that would be delegate to other people who have specific expertise in a certain skill or a certain field, which then stops me having to do that, because I've done the thing where I've been sort of with art software and things, when I'm trying to do art software for different things for my business and stuff. I'm thinking, I'm not a graphic designer. Why am I doing this? And I remember my son coming to me, and I'd been on for about three hours on something, going, well, that looks all right. What do you think of this? And he's very gifted as an artist, and he's sort of just he's doing a psychology degree now, but he's doing his A-level in art at the time. And he says, "Do you want my advice, Dad?" Yeah. He says, "Hire an artist, hire a graphic designer, because you're brilliant at marketing, you're brilliant at writing, all that kind of stuff is you. One thing you're not is a graphic designer. Nor should you have to be."
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's a key takeaway for all entrepreneurs out there. They don't have to and should not be trying to do all the tasks themselves. But I think that's where AI comes in as well, because that's you get purpose-built things, as you were saying.
Yes,
but
exactly.
Where does it happen then? Because I know that if I wanted to hire a graphic designer from scratch, I would look at reviews. I would look at graphic designers who've done certain things that are in line with what I wanted to do before, et cetera, et cetera. How would I go about doing that from an AI point of view? If I wanted to use, say, a CRM system, and I wanted to see our CRM system that was matched to me, and I didn't want to waste time going through one and then going, that doesn't work, or maybe I'm thick. I wanted to sort of very quickly find the right system for me. How would I do that?
You speak to a consultant. Because you speak to the likes of me, and the reason why you do that is because I deal with so many different systems, and like you said, it's the fact that I get exposed to so much more because that's my job than you do as your particular job. And what we do is we go through a series of discussions, and so we talk about really what's the goal, what you're trying to get out of the system. And that it's surprising how many people just want something because it sounds good without actually understanding why they want it in the first place. And so the first real thing for me as a consultant is to work out what was your aim and goal of having this particular thing. Sometimes with people, they want to replicate something that's manual. They want to replicate a physical diary that they've got, or they want to replicate going back, because I'm old, to a Rolodex of contacts. And when you get to that point, you can go, well, this particular CRM you're looking at does so much more than that, it's going to confuse you, because this thing can do your marketing, it can do your sales funnels, but that's not what you want it particularly to do. What we need to do is look back at a more simpler pared back CRM that then does the focused elements that you need. But until we have that conversation and work out what your aims and goals are, you could also say to me, I want this to do this, but I've also got this other system that does X, Y, and Z, and go, well, actually, you can have a CRM that can do that. We merge the two together and save you some money, because instead of having one thing that does this and another thing that does this, we merge them together. Or sometimes we can go, let's go completely bespoke. So, for example, there was a estate agent I've been dealing with, and they wanted a system that would manage the CRM, but also, because they're estate agents and they deal with clients for very short periods of time. And so eventually, if they used a traditional CRM, they'd end up with thousands of contacts over a very short period of time. And they only deal with those. And so most of those contacts are going to fall off, but they're still going to be in their database if they use a traditional CRM. So what we did was we created a Trello board for them, and I did some automation, some AI in the background that pulled something that looked very much like a CRM for the contacts. But when it got to the end of the project and it said, I've delivered everything that this client needs. They've got their property, they're at the end, they've got their keys, we've finished off the process. We then wait for 3 months. At the end of that process, we've got a fixed date there. And at the end of 3 months, we contact them. Well, not us, but the system tells the estate agents to contact the person, says, is everything okay? Is there any other services that you need? And if they come back with no, automatically the system removes them from that CRM. It's still the records, so we still got records of them, but it's not the CRM anymore. It's not in their live contacts. So they're sending out communications, saying the estate agents is closed over Christmas. It's not going out to them because they're not dealing with that. But what it does with the automation is it makes sure that the information they need is there, and you're not going to find a CRM off the shelf that does that for you. You're not going to find a CRM that has that. What you'd end up doing is someone manually going, are we dealing with that one? Not anymore, delete them. Are we dealing with that one? Not anymore, delete them. Because we followed the process and we got to the end of the process and going, we know it's the end because we've got a fixed process. The AI says at the end, we've waited 3 months, so we're not just delete them instantly. We've checked that they're happy with everything, so we can do everything like get reviews and things like that. And at that point in time, we're removing them from the active contact list, means that we've got a contact list, a CRM list that is meaningful to the business. And it's things like that where understanding what the business needs is important to understanding what they need in terms of what we're going to be offering them in terms of the automation, in terms of AI, in terms of which system.
Okay. I mean, I suppose as well, I mean, as a business owner myself, and I think a lot of people resonate with a lot of stuff you said, but they'll also have this thing of pound signs or dollar signs, depending on where they're living, in the back of their head, because it all comes down to money at the end of the day. And I suppose one thing you need to do is you need to weigh up how much time how much money rather your time is worth, because if you're spending all day trying to do something and not succeeding, then you're potentially wasting an awful lot of money, because had that thing been working, whatever it happens to be, then you could be making more money and generating more income, etc., etc. The other way of looking at it as well, I suppose, is if you're hiring staff to do all of these tasks, because I know automation can sort of do a lot of the jobs that your typical VA can do now. Up
to a point, again with that, because I know immediately people's going to be like, "Oh, taking jobs." It could do the monotonous areas that VAs do, but there's a lot of VAs out there that can do quite a lot of the technical side of it. And so again, it's about giving the VA that you have the specific tasks that you don't want to do because they're boring, but also the specific tasks that are not the repeated monotonous things, because anything that can be repeated, AI can do. Anything that needs a human eye to analyze, to anticipate, that's something that you can hand over. And again, you're focusing their time. So you're not just giving them something that isn't value added to the business.
So what would you say then, in terms of cost then, is a typical, what would you say to a client, I suppose, if they came to you and said, right, okay then, I'm interested in this, but at the same time, I do have sort of questions about cost and things like that. What would your typical response to that be?
My typical response is to ask them where they want the business to go.
Right.
Because there's two sides. One, is it a business that has been really successful, and they've been really successful, so now they're so busy they're not actually developing the business? If that's the case, then with the money that they're going to put into me or another business consultant, they're going to get that back in having more product and more service being available, because as soon as you get more efficient, you can then produce more things, whether that's service or product. And so the money that they spend on myself would easily fit themselves back in. The more difficult aspect of that is if they're a business that isn't too busy and they're a business that are struggling to know where they're going. At that point in time, it really is a case of them working out what it is that they want to achieve and working out whether it is a technology issue that they're not achieving, or whether it is more fundamental issue of how they're doing things like marketing and things like that. So for businesses like that, I never throw myself onto a business that I recommend you must pay me. What I generally do for a business that isn't succeeding in itself is I offer a free hour to anyone. I will sit down for that free hour and work out where the problem is, where the pain points are within that business. And with that, I may say to them, you're not at the point in time of looking at business efficiencies. There are things we can do here. Here's a list of them. But really what you need to do is improve your marketing. So your content writing. So go and speak to Paul as an example.
Good example.
Or is it that they're looking at the wrong clients and they need a business coach rather than a consultant? With the understanding that once they get that sort of area, pain points and those fixed, then we can look at the efficiencies. Because there's no point in me making a business really efficient that is going to fail to be, that's going to fail while being efficient. You know, you can be really efficient and still fail, where the businesses that I can help the most are the businesses that are just really busy. And every week's the exact same. They're the real businesses where I can come in. If you're finding that your Monday you're doing the exact same thing and your Fridays you're doing the exact same thing, it means that no point during that week you're moving your business forward. You're just repeating the exact same activities every single week. And they're the ones where we go, okay, let's have a look at what we do in the week. What are the repetitive tasks? What is it that we can automate? What is it that we can pull out and do outside of those things? And then give you half a day back, give you a day back, use those half a day and a day to bring in more business, but also develop the business, move the business forward to the next step. And so, yes, and in terms of cost, it depends on what the business wants to do. So I'm offering a subscription service where there's 8 hours of consultation a month for the first 3 months and an hour for the subsequent weeks after that. So that's 4 hours a week. And that's £150 a month. And that's for businesses that don't have the money just to throw into the thing and want that gradual improvement over 12 months. If there's a larger business and they want me to go in, as one of my clients do, and spend 2 days a week with them, and so they can put the improvement processes in a short period of time, you know, that's £350 as a day rate going in. But then you get the immediate impact, you know, within 2 months, everything that the business needs are going to be in there, all the automations are going to be put into place. But it really depends on which direction the business wants to go. And we'll have that discussion long before we start putting any implementations in place. We use that free hour to understand where the business wants to go.
And I suppose it really depends on where they are themselves as a business and what they want to achieve, and financially what they're already spending on trying to achieve these results, I suppose, is the thing. Because you know, if you've got a member of staff that you're paying to do certain tasks, and you can get an automated service to do that, say for the £150 a month, then you're not going to get any member of staff for £150 a month to work full-time on that level of work, are you?
Exactly.
So I suppose it is weighed up in that sort of way. Is there for those people, I mean, we'll get some people, I suppose, who's going to be saying, well, I want a system that you can just build and it's there and then that's it. That's all I need. Is that something is that just crazy talk, or is that something that actually happens, or would you advise people to go, no, I think you should have ongoing something? Or what would your response to that be?
There's no system, right? Going back slightly to the exact thing you said. If you have a system there that it sits there and does exactly what you want today, and you expect it to do exactly what you want in a year's time, then you're not expecting your business to change in that year. And so what I would say is we can build a system that does everything you want today, and we can agree on a time frame. But if you're not expecting your business to change in a year, then I would question your growth, the model of your business. Now, maybe there's a business out there that, you know, somebody's 5 years from retirement and they've started a business to do a particular thing, and they have a particular fixed element that they wanted there. That's fine, but there's very few businesses that I would say that outside influences don't change. So, example, if you told me 3 years ago and you said, can you set this business up? Because I'm going to be doing lots of client meetings, going to go to lots of sites, and I want a booking system that does this and the other. I could have set that up. Absolutely. Not a problem. And then you say, I don't do anything with that system because this is what I do. They'd be like, fine, here's your system. I don't recommend that. 8 months later, you'd be coming to me going, I can't go and see any clients on site because there's a pandemic. I need that system now to do all my online things. Which online system would you recommend? I've heard about this Teams and this Zoom. that system that we set up worked in that particular setting, and then other influences affect that. And yes, that's a bit of an extreme one, but that was an extreme thing that we all are going through still. But in terms of how businesses are, if you fix your business into a particular fixed model, you're not going to be able to cope with all the other pressures and changes that affect that business. And very few businesses happen in silo. And so, what I do recommend is if so we're talking that subscription model, which is over 12 months, is that we get together every 3 months after that, just to monitor, just to see where the business is and see if everything that we set up meets the current requirements. And it'd be very rare for business to be completely unchanged over a year and not have some outside influence that would, require some modification.
Yeah, well, I know, speaking from my business, yes, they do change, and they have to change, because if you're going to grow, then that it implies that you're going to have something change. Yeah. Sometimes, I suppose some basic processes will stay the same, but yeah, as far as everything else goes, I absolutely see that.
Like, here's an example, going back to the landscapers that I was dealing with. They had 5 staff and they were going up to 15 staff. Now, the process we put in place for 5 staff, we don't want them to replicate that exactly for 15 staff. We want to look at that process for 5 staff and go, which elements of this process are we going to split off and give to a particular person? And if we split off and give to a particular person, how do we want the information to flow between these new people instead of 5 to 15? And how can we automate that? Because again, with 50 people, you don't want somebody needing to speak to all 14 other people before they get an answer to something. Or, I know that's an extreme thing, but you want them to have the information available there. You want person X to record something and person Y to read it without needing to know what the interaction is between them. And so, in terms of, there are some core processes that stay the same, but even those core processes that stay the same still will get modified in terms of resources and who does them, provided the business is a growth model.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned a minute ago about the pandemic, and I suppose we have to touch base on this slightly here, but because I think for me, the big shift, things were moving at quite a fast rate anyway into AI and automation and things. But I think that the pandemic sort of supercharged that somewhat, didn't it, really? Because people were just denied human contact completely. And they had to find new ways of marketing, of talking to their clients, of doing all sorts of things. What kind of changes did you see as a professional in this field?
Remote working needed a completely different way of communicating between people. Emails have been problematic for a good decade, and emails have the entire purpose of the original email was that memo between the office. And where we ended up with was that people would send hundreds of emails to basically protect themselves, saying, I gave you this piece of information. Even if they didn't need that piece of information, they'll pass it on to somebody else in a business just to say, I've gave it to somebody else. It's no longer my responsibility. I've written a nice email. And the problem with the pandemic, when the pandemic first started, is emails became too relied on initially in terms of how people communicated. And so looking at systems like Teams, looking at systems like WhatsApp, looking at systems that record conversations in a way a conversation happens was a vital change. Because when I talk to you, you don't expect me to suddenly give you a 5-minute speech and then for you to then give me a 5-minute speech back, which is how emails work. Emails work by condensing a whole heap of information into a block of virtual information and then send it, and then that person does the same thing. it doesn't work because of the fact that, and I did communication theory, so it comes from this. It doesn't work because of the fact that an email contains too much information that can then have too many other questions attached to it. Where something like Teams and WhatsApp, you ask one thing, you get something back, you analyze it, you then base your next question on what you've known so far. And because it's pretty much instant between two people, very similar to talking, you deal with it as a conversation. You don't put that 2 paragraphs of text in, you just put a couple of lines, somebody comes back with something. Moving to that more realistic way of talking. I think there was an expectation that people would have 30-second conversations on things like Zoom. That never happened because Zoom's much more for meeting. But having that communication on Teams and on WhatsApp and the other apps that do very similar sort of things was a vital change to businesses understanding that that's how they can communicate and that's how they communicate efficiently. And it's not just about protecting your back. It's not just about, I've told Paul this. It's in an email that he may never have read, but it's in there. Yeah. It's about being efficient with the way the information went. Now, in terms of AI, which is obviously the topic today, we're moving a lot more in terms of developing that conversation. And so there are things that Microsoft are doing with something called Viva, where they're monitoring how much communication people are doing and what level that is to make sure people aren't being siloed. And so in terms of, it's a silent AI because it's not something that you interact with. It's something that monitors how you're interacting. And it's not to be used by managers as a stick saying you're not doing anything. It's more to make sure that people aren't sitting on the computer working for 6 hours without any interaction with somebody else, because that collaboration aspect, which is vital to any business, especially the larger the business is, that collaboration aspect needs to continue. And one of the things that the pandemic slightly put a stop on because businesses weren't built in that way is that collaboration aspect. Somebody would be given a task to do, they'll do the task, but that task would probably be better if somebody else was saying, oh, you're doing that. Well, looking at what you do there, what I would do is do this other thing, like your son did with the graphic design. Somebody coming along and going, it's really good, but I recommend you send that to Anna down the road because Anna's really good at that. See what Anna thinks of this, and having that collaboration aspect of bouncing ideas off, which, as I said, Teams and WhatsApp and things like that are really good at, and emails just aren't.
That brings in another aspect of AI, doesn't it? Because a lot of people feel that, or are scared that AI and computers, and you say everyone buried their heads in the phones before the pandemic. You couldn't walk anywhere without you can see technology all around us. And the big fear was technology and Skynet was going to take over the world, and people would stop talking to people as human beings. But I suppose if there's a positive to what happened with the pandemic, what it's actually done is it's freed up so much more time in people's lives so that they can go out and communicate and meet with people, because you've got the AI side covering a lot of the stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I think is huge.
No, absolutely. And the bigger IT companies are working on that, and I know that worries people that there's more monitoring, but it's not monitoring in terms of what somebody's specifically saying. It's the amount of information that's moving that's being monitored. It's just making sure that, and we've got this new variant coming out, and COVID is not unfortunately going away tomorrow, even though we'd all like it to. And so making sure that people's mental stability is there for long term, so that remote working, hybrid working, whatever it is there. The company I've been dealing with recently, one of their staff, unfortunately, her husband is pretty ill. And so even with all the opening up, she's never coming into the office. She's always been remote working. But we need to make sure the communication with her and the rest of the team doesn't just disappear because she's long-term home working. And AI is supporting that. It's not the same sort of AI as giving information, but it's AI in terms of making sure that it flags up to a manager. Hey, this person hasn't been communicated with for the past 2 days. Is this a problem? Is this something, that needs to be looked at? And it is definitely helping on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Okay, so what would your advice be then? Because we're gonna wrap this up in a second. It's been amazing talking to you. What would your advice be for somebody who's wanting to dip the toes in there? We're talking to the entrepreneur, the business owner, the serial entrepreneur, perhaps, who runs one or more business, and they're wanting to explore the possibilities of integrating AI into their lives, thereby freeing up their time to do what it is they know and love. What would be your advice to those guys guys and girls? I say guys as a collective term, so any girls listen to this, it's not meant as a guys as in males. It's guys as everybody. Anyway, so what would be your advice to those people?
Got there eventually, Paul. Speak to myself or a consultant, because what I do, and I can't speak for all consultants out there, is I listen. And so the first thing is not to think about it into how can I automate what I do. It's to speak to somebody and talk about what your pain points are. What is it that frustrates you? What is it that you spend time doing that you don't want to be doing? What is it that you spent? Think about what you've been doing the past 3 months and think about what
would you rather be doing?
Yeah, exactly. What would you rather be doing? And at that point in time, what I do is I look to see what those pain points are and how we can minimize them. It's the 80-20% rule, where basically you try and fix 80% of the problems with 20% of the solutions. Or is it the way around? Yeah, whichever way around it is. But yeah, you try and
it's the other one, but yeah, that's good.
Yeah, you try and fix the biggest problems with the smaller solutions. It's the low-hanging fruit. Once you do that, then you look at what the other pain points are. You look at the other pain points, how you go down that road. But initially, it's what frustrates you today. What is it that, and a lot of the times it's sort out people's spreadsheets. And so I've got, somebody's got 9 spreadsheets that do all sorts of things. Well, let's just amalgamate those together so you get what you want in one go. Let's fix that pain point and let's look at the next one. And it's just identifying that and giving people time back. And the more time we give back, the more time they can actually work out what the other problems are. And yeah, it's a role.
You can socialize with people and actually be human beings.
That would be nice one day.
Yeah. So brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Well, as Ian said as well, everybody, he does offer a completely free hour where you can sit and you can talk to him about anything you like. Well, not anything, obviously related to technology in your business. You can talk about your dogs and cats, but I don't think you'd sort of get much out of that. So would you like to give away your contact details here so that people can get in touch and book you in for that free hour?
Yep, so most of my contact details are here. One of these QR codes, and I should know which, basically gets you to my calendar, which you can book your free hour on. I think it is this one. So yes, the QR code there, and just email us if you can't get through that. The email's there, Ian@Warrender.ltd, and have a discussion and then see what it is I can do for you, and we'll have a chat.
That's amazing. Well, thank you very much for joining me today and contributing to the Entrepreneur's eFriend. And we hope to speak to you at some point in the future as well. But thank you very much, Ian.
Thank you very much, Paul.